no inspection.
I'm gonna record it anyway.
Oh, no inspection.
No option period.
no
He just
option
said,
period.
I want it.
And so that is, we
And he
believe,
he wanted our furniture, and we're moving in here and we don't know what we'd have done with it until we figure out what to do. And so we got extra money for that. It's better than we could have hoped for.
he wanted to move in a week. He gave us 2 weeks. So anyhow, it's all going to be over August 3rd, but we are in progress. And those of you who come here, this room is going to stay this way for a while. Just so you know, our vision is to make the garage, which is bigger than this, into a Sunday school room, air conditioning, everything. And then this would be a living room, but I'm not sure what's going to go first. A bathtub is going to go
A
first.
bathtub for Julie. This is important.
Bathtub back there, has he torn up?
I tore a bathtub out. Yeah, it's pretty hideous looking. Hopefully that gets done soon, but this is important. And so we're not gonna change that. We won't do this until we have provision for something else.
So we are on the 10th week of John, and quick review. By the time you guys are finished, everybody's going to know you find the purpose of John in chapter 20, verses 30 and 31. John recorded the signs that Jesus performed so that we would believe Jesus is the Son of God, and that by believing that you will have life in his name, which means you'll have eternal life. And so last week, our review where we ended up, we're halfway, or we're in the middle of chapter 11, and with the raising of Lazarus from the dead. And many believe that this was his last public sign. So as we talk about the signs John recorded, and yet we're only in chapter 11, and we're only halfway through the book of John, and the last 12 chapters of the book of John are the last 6 days of Jesus's life. So just putting that in perspective, I think is interesting. We also, one other thing we learned last week is that there is more than one town or city called Bethany. Just like Antioch, there's more than one Antioch, there's more than one Bethany. And last week, Jesus went from one Bethany, which was about 12 hours away on the other side of the Jordan, to the Bethany just outside of Jerusalem, which was 20 minutes outside, or an hour walk outside of Jerusalem. So those are sort of some of the reviews. And I'm going to take up on an area that we'd already started, if that's okay. Should I start? So I'm on John chapter 11, verse 17. So remember, he had received word that Lazarus was sick in the first place, and he told his disciples that he waited 2 days, and by the time he gets there, Lazarus has already died. Okay. When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already spent 4 days in the tomb. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, a little less than 2 miles away, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them in the loss of their brother. So when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would have not died. But even now I know that God will give you what you ask of him. Your brother will rise again," Jesus told her. Martha replied, "I know that he'll rise again in the resurrection of the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me will live even though he dies, and everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?" "Yes, Lord," she answered. "I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who was to come into the world." After Martha had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary to tell her, "The teacher is here, and she's asking for you." And when Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still in the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who were in the house consoling Mary saw how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there. When Mary came to Jesus and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if you had been there, my brother would not have died.
So, well, no, go ahead.
Okay.
There's a part where he
Yeah.
says,
When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled.
that's good.
Okay.
So some of this stuff, I hope it doesn't sound too tedious, but John talks about telling us these things so that we can believe. It helps to understand this Jesus that we talk about. And there are things that we don't get explained to us very often. One of these I didn't know until this week. But what's happened is they're mourning. Lazarus has died. And I kind of explained to you that they want a lot of mourners. They make a big show out of mourning. In the Middle East, they know how to mourn. And to the point that for important people or people who can afford it, sometimes they actually hire mourners. They pay people to come and mourn. And it says a lot about, who we are as people. But word has gotten out that Jesus is on his way. And Martha goes out to meet him. And in that, people went back and forth between places like that. She knows he's coming. She goes out to meet him, catches him outside of town. And we talked about that last week, how she said, if you had just gotten here sooner, my brother wouldn't be dead. And they went through this whole discussion. He says, Martha, I told you, do you believe that I'm who I say I am? She says, yeah, I believe you're the Christ, the Messiah who was to come, the Messiah who's been prophesied. I believe you're him. And he says, well, watch. And she says, I believe, but she believes that he will rise again in the future. But he says, Martha, I am the resurrection. So anyway, Martha goes back to town, finds her sister Mary. Apparently Jesus has asked for her. I don't know why he didn't come straight into town, but they're somewhere outside of Bethany. And she says, the teacher is here and he's asking for you. And she got up instantly and went quickly, it says. And these people who are mourning, figure, well, she got up so quick, she's headed back to the tomb to mourn there, and they're going to go with her. And so as she comes up, it says that she's weeping and she's mourning, but she is crying, and these people with her are crying also. And it says that Jesus, seeing that, is troubled in his spirit. Okay. And it sounds like he's overcome with their grief, but that word actually means he's indignant. He's almost angry. And it's not a word you use by mistake. You don't say that someone is troubled when you mean they're indignant. And part of this is these mourners, they're making this big show, and he's already told them Lazarus is gonna rise. Lazarus is coming back, and they still don't get it. And they're out there making this big show, and he is indignant. And it's a picture of Jesus that we don't often get. We got it when he's in the temple courts and he turns over the tables, but something about this makes him indignant, and we can speculate what it is. But that word means what it means. And I want to, because this is going to come up twice in this lesson about words that you use two different words. If I told you someone was crying, you'd have a certain picture. But if I told you they were sobbing, you get a different picture, right? What if I told you they were wailing, versus mourning? If they're wailing, you get this picture. Well, John goes to the trouble of using words that you don't use by mistake. You don't say somebody is wailing when they're sitting there sniffling and crying. These people are crying loudly. They are mourning in the best Middle East tradition. And it says that because the people come and they're all doing this, he is indignant. We'll look more at maybe why.
side as to, is basically 2 miles away, and it takes 4 years to get to.
Not 4 years.
4 days to get to the tomb.
No, he was in the other Bethany. He was in Bethany across the Jordan, which was about a 12-hour. And then he went and he was going to Bethany. That was 2 hours outside. So it was a 12-hour.
Let's do a refresher.
Yeah.
He's healed the blind man and they're angry about it. And he has gone over across the Jordan. So he's like, 12 hours away in this town away from them. And now he's coming back to just right outside Jerusalem. I mean, not a stone's throw, but it's a suburb of Jerusalem. So he's made this long trek back. And then he's right outside of town. Well, wherever Lazarus is, and we're going to talk about that, but he's right there in this place that's near Jerusalem. So the timing all makes sense. I mean, it takes him a while to get back from where he was. And the fact that he agreed to get that close to Jerusalem at all, because they're going to kill him, that's sort of important that we see that he's been willing to go back there when nobody thinks he will.
Do we have any indication, or do you have any indication about the Sabbath role in this days?
Not in this.
Okay.
Not in this.
Because if he's gonna tee off people as he has been, I mean, that would have been outstanding, except for the caliber of miracle he's gonna pull out.
So he has two during this time. He has two things that he's actually three. He's doing these signs that show who he is, that he really is who he claims to be. He is absolutely infuriating the Jews, but he's already done a fine job of that. That job is actually complete. And then he's teaching his disciples, particularly the 12, because it's not long now before he's going to die. And he's bringing them up to speed because they're the ones that are going to carry this message. They're going to be the witnesses. So in this case, this is a lot to do with him showing these people so that they can believe he's who he says he is.
So
The other thing that got me, Martha and Mary, is John's use of, I know you are the Messiah. Not I believe. I know. And then he asked point blank, do you believe? And she goes back to, I guess, the old law says, well, I know the Messiah is coming and tomorrow or in the future. So what was the understanding? What was the teaching?
You hear me come to this, so we'll go ahead and refresh on this, but that's the old saying that says, Lord, I believe, help thou my unbelief. We believe. And here's Martha saying, no, I believe that's who you are. I believe that right even now, you can do whatever you choose to. And she would like her brother to be alive, but even she doesn't believe that he's coming back after 4 days dead. So to believe and yet to have that human limitation on, I don't know how much of this I can get my hands around. That's what's going on. I mean, that's the picture we're supposed to get. And he's given her his word now. He said, Lazarus is going to rise, but they still don't truly fully grasp it.
And what was the concept of the resurrection for Mary and Martha?
Oh, let's go through this, and some of this will come up on that. I don't want to lose continuity on what's going on here.
Okay, so Jesus is talking in verse 34. Where have you put him? He asked. Come and see, Lord, they answered. Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, see how he loved him?
Wait, you skipped something.
No, I didn't.
Okay.
But some of them asked, could not this man who opened his eyes of the blind also have kept Lazarus from dying? Jesus, once again, deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. So
this again is one of those things that we tend to miss. He's indignant and he says, where have you put him? And it says, they said, not Mary, they, all of these, oh, come and see, we'll take you over to the place because you've basically let this guy die. And it says Jesus wept. And that's the English word for it. That is, I think I told you this last week, the shortest verse in the entire Bible, 2 words. But what's odd and what I didn't even notice before till this week, the word that gets used there when Jesus wept is there was tears. It is very explicitly silent crying. It's not this big mourning. And what struck me as so odd is that we in English, we have one word, wept, but the two words that John chooses to use, one describes them and they're just, I mean, they are mourning, they are wailing. It is explicitly a loud form of weeping. And then it says, Jesus wept, and it is explicitly silent. It's a weird thing. Those words mean so, and so John,
But in some of this, it is a translation because we do have different words. They could have translated Jesus mourned.
and some
I
of
mean,
it,
that they mourned and Jesus wept, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
the point is that John goes to the trouble of using two different words to describe what's going on here. And I think sometimes it's good for us to have this picture. Jesus is moved, but people teach this in a way that it sounds like, what did you say this morning? He's sort of,
Oh, it sounded like he was, just not that mushy, that he was just, he couldn't control himself. I mean, he was not happy that, well, I shouldn't say he was not happy. He was disheartened that he's at the end of his public ministry and these people still didn't believe. I would say.
we don't know for sure. We're not told, but Mary's probably right that they don't understand even at this point who he is. And so they go back to the tomb. When they see him crying, here's the last thing, and this is important because they see the tears, and some of them go, wow, look how much he loved Lazarus. And we're given to believe that Jesus is doing this because somehow Mary, Martha, and Lazarus are more important to him than other humans. But they say, look, oh, he's got tears. Look how much he loved Lazarus. But other ones said, if this guy could truly give sight back to the blind, couldn't he have kept Lazarus from dying? And what you see from that is they're saying he's not really who he claims. If he was really such a big deal, if he was really so good that he can give sight to a man that's been blind from birth, surely he could have helped his own. So if he's who he says, and if Lazarus is so special, why didn't he cure Lazarus? And that is their way of saying he's not who he claims. And at that, we get that same word that Jesus is troubled in his spirit. And I go back and see what that is. And it is that same word. Actually, not only does it mean indignant, it comes from the word snort. Like the picture is a horse that's upset at you and makes that noise. That's someone he was put out. And for these people to be saying, couldn't he have saved his own friend? And it tells us
Jesus, once again, deeply moved, came to the tomb. But that deeply moved means sort of disgusted, disgruntled.
indignant.
It's indignant. I mean, and that is not the image, like I was telling Scott this morning, I have never listened to a sermon where I would have thought that Jesus was indignant. I was just thinking that, oh my gosh, his dear friend died. But, it's not very.
No, they're implying that he didn't care enough about his friend or he couldn't have done it because he's not really who he says. And he's put out at it. And it's a picture of Jesus that we just don't get. And that word cannot be, you wouldn't use the word that's in there. I did a dive on this. I mean, John is telling us exactly that Jesus is not happy about what they've said.
Verse 39.
Why does he put that in his spirit? I mean, you're seeing that the body physically of Jesus is hurt.
Troubled in his spirit.
His spirit.
Troubled in his spirit is an English translation. Okay. That's the English form. Somebody chose, they're trying to explain something, but I'm telling you, I went back and looked at what's really there. And it's not that he's just troubled in his spirit. He is put out at them. He is indignant at them for saying, and I guess you're troubled inside when somebody says that
You're not who you're supposed to.
you didn't save your own friend or whatever. But again, there's this picture of Jesus that is not, first of all, not mushy, not just, but he also gets a little put out with people. So
Take away the stone, Jesus said. Lord, by now he stinks, said Martha, the sister of the dead man. It has already been 4 days. Jesus replied, did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? So they took away the stone. Then Jesus lifted his eyes toward upward and said, Father.
Hold on a second right there. Let's make this quick because,
Okay.
and I don't want to lose continuity, but I think sometimes it helps us to understand what's going on and that these are real people and not just words on a page. The guy's been in the tomb for 4 days. They have a law rule that says when someone dies, you get them in the whatever tomb before sundown that day. 4 days. And Martha said, Mary says, Martha, by now he stinks. We shuffle people off to a place in a cold storage. We don't deal with
Embalm them,
bodies. We
yeah.
embalm them. These people are much less squeamish about these things. They deal with the reality of death. And she uses a word that we would never use. You know, by now he stinks. And she is understandably has this limitation on how much she can believe. And she goes, it's no use. He's been in there. Don't roll the stone away. Oh, don't roll the stone away. It's going to be a horrible smell coming out of there. And he just said, didn't I tell you that if you believed, you'd see the glory of God? This is, again, that example of, I believe, but I'm not sure that I can stretch it far enough to take that in. That's tough. And they go.
I went back and tried to find that quote. Didn't I not tell you? I didn't find it. Did you find it?
No, but he has told her in so, you know, maybe not, we don't have explicit words, but he's let her know that. And he's told her, I am the resurrection. He didn't say it word for word. I agree. That's.
So listen to this next part. This is Jesus praying to God out loud so people can hear him.
This is an amazing prayer.
So
listen to this prayer.
So they took away the stone. Then Jesus lifted his eyes upward and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I say this for the benefit of the people standing here so that they may believe that you sent me.
This is a conversation with God. And that's what prayer is. And one of the things, I hate to say this, but public prayer, especially like in churches, people actually script them. In a lot of places, they have a script for what they're going to say and all the words, and they say these big flowery things, and it's them talking to them a lot of the time. Jesus is talking to the Father. He's talking to God, and he says, I thank you that you listen to me. He says, I know that I always know that you listen to me. I'm saying this for the benefit of the people. He's having a conversation with God. He's talking about the people that are here in front of them to God. And I'm saying I'm only saying this, not that I doubt that you listen to me, but I'm saying so that they'll understand that you listen to me and believe. And it is this amazing prayer.
And I also like some of the verb tenses here are always, and this idea that I am, I always was, I always will be. And when you read some of these things, all of a sudden, I always think, oh, did they mess up the verb tense? But listen to this one more time. It says, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me.
I knew, yeah.
I knew. So I past knew that you
I
always
already
heard
knew
me.
that.
Yeah. But I say this for the benefit of the people standing here so that they may believe that you sent me.
I went to a public meeting a little over a week ago, and they do a prayer at the beginning. And a lot of the time, I've been to the same meeting before, and it's this scripted platitude thing. This guy got up, and it was just a conversation with God. I mean, he's just talking, and he says, and it was the most amazing thing I've heard in a public place, maybe ever. And I told him so. I thought, it was almost shocking that this is just a conversation with God, with your maker. And that's what this is. And I was just, almost awestruck by this. He's speaking with God. And if you can see my hands, he's speaking with God, and he's talking about these people over here. I know you listen to me. I'm only saying this for their benefit so that they can believe. That is a shocking display of a conversation with God. And I think it's a good example to us about prayer. It's a conversation with God, and it's not a formality.
After Jesus had said this, he called out in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The man who had been dead came out with his hands and his feet bound in strips of linen and his face wrapped in a cloth. "Unwrap him and let him go," Jesus told them. Therefore, many of the Jews who had come to Mary and had seen what Jesus did believed in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. I'm going to stop there, Scott.
Sorry, I didn't do something great.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
Well, what I saw from this week, and don't take this the wrong way. I told Mary I'm probably going to offend somebody again, but this idea of Lazarus being raised is almost the least important thing that happens. I mean, it's important to him. Clearly, it's important to Mary and Martha. It's important but what we're being taught here. This is an amazing event, as it should be. And it's there, as John tells us, so that we might believe. And you see that of these Jews, some of them do believe, but other people, their first response is to run off and tell on him.
But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. Let's go tell. We just watched somebody being raised from the dead. Let's go tell on him.
You remember the man that's been blind from birth gets his sight back. And what do? Why? They want to bring him up on charges. Instead of rejoicing that the man has been healed, they're concerned about protocol and their power and everything else. And that's the same thing that happens here. This man, 4 days, and there's a reason why Jesus didn't go there immediately, because after 4 days, there's no doubt the man is dead. If he was alive when they put him in there, if he was just, like in a coma, after 4 days in a place with the rock on the no food, no water, the heat, this man is dead. And anybody could see that. Nobody has moved this stone before now. So it was done in a way that they can't deny it. You can't look at it and say, well, there must be some rational explanation for this. There's no rational explanation for this. And some of these people, their reaction, their response is to run off to the power brokers and tell on him. So that, obviously they're going to try and find some fault in it, but we're going to see what they realize is now people are really going to follow him.
Is there any correlation of the 4 days versus the 3 days?
If there is, it's beyond my pay grade. I don't, if you remember 2 weeks ago, I actually sort of started off with the challenge. Would you rather have knowledge or understanding? And the knowledge of that, if I knew that there was something about the 4 days, what's important here, the understanding of what's going on here to me. And so I don't know, Gene, I mean, I've seen that come up about the 4 days, and theologians just love to pick that kind of stuff apart. If it's important, I always feel like mostly it leaps out at you. If I have to go dig something like that out, maybe I'm a simple person. I want to look at the understanding of what I'm being taught here. And what I'm being taught here is that this thing that we understand as death, Jesus says he's sleeping. It is these different, just like the blindness. There were 2 different things when we looked at the blindness. The man has no eyes to see with, and yet he understands. And this man is sleeping, he's dead, but we see that it's not necessarily the way what we think it is. In this case, it was important that he come back, that Jesus finally makes it absolutely clear he is who he says he
And
is.
just to touch base on what Gene was asking, there's a lot of people that do number things with the Bible, that this number means this and this number means that, right?
Yes.
And it's a lot of work And I've actually even read some books on it, and you get into it and say, oh, look, all these numbers fit. And then there's some number that doesn't fit and they make it fit some other way. So it's a lot of work. And it, like you said, it's really above our pay grade, because I got a book on all that number stuff and it's sort of crazy.
Oh, yeah, it is nuts.
And
there-
I like numbers.
There
It's
are
so
times,
crazy.
there are times that it's clearly important, and the way it's accentuated in some of the scriptures, you realize you're being taught something and you go looking for that wisdom within it, that it's really brought out. But in this case, it's 4 days. It's quite possible that it means something, but Gene, I don't have it in me.
Okay, where was I? Okay.
They went off and told.
Okay, yes. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. When the chief priests and the Pharisees convened the Sanhedrin, then the chief priests and the Pharisees convened the Sanhedrin and said, what are we to do? This man is performing many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him. And then the Romans will come and take away our place in our nation. But one of them, named Caiaphas, who was a high priest that year, said to them, you know nothing at all. You do not realize that it is better for you that one man die for the people than the whole nation perish. Caiaphas did not say this on his own. Instead, as a high priest that year, he was prophesying that Jesus would die for the nation, and not only for the nation, but also for the scattered children of God, to gather them together into one. So from that day on, they plotted to kill him.
And I think I've told you, sometimes Mary and I go over these things so much, it's hard for us to remember. It's like deja vu. Did we cover this in class or did we not? And that's, kind of sad. But I think we did. And I think the point of this is simply they're debating what to do. Jesus now has brought a guy back from the dead. There are a whole bunch of witnesses. There are a whole bunch of Jews who actually believe in him because of it. And they say, our days are numbered if this gets out, because that's more powerful than anything else he's done. And what are we going to do about him? Now, they all know what they're saying. Caiaphas is high priest, and he just makes it easy for him. You know what we're going to do. I mean, look, it's better that, because if this gets around and the people get an uprising going, the Romans are going to swoop in. So he's justifying what they're going to do. We've got to sacrifice one man for the sake of the multitude, the nation. And of course, our power will be messed up if this happens. And I really think that and I've said this before, they've been waiting for the Messiah, but I think a lot of them would not be happy to see him arrive, because right now they're the roosters. They're in charge of things. They're the big important people. If the Messiah comes, they're going to be followers. There's an old saying that someone would rather reign in hell than serve in heaven. And it's, it's more truthful than it might look. There are people that, they don't care what it is, as long as they have the most power out of anybody. So that's what's going on. And they literally then make the decision. They are going to kill him. And now they've justified it. Now they've got a thing that says, it's better that one man die than the whole nation. And John just fills in the blank. He says, we're convinced in retrospect that this was a prophecy. This was the high priest, even though he's a corrupt high priest, the high priest has just delivered a prophecy without knowing it, that Jesus would die for the people.
Except that John, I'm not too happy with John's commentary.
Sorry.
He says this stuff about, he didn't say it on his own. Who pushed him? What pushed him?
Who pushed
So that
you?
he would prophesy the death. This is a corrupt priest.
No, but this is the result of it was a prophecy. What he said ended up being prophetic, whether it was
Is
prophetic.
it possible that God uses people who don't believe in him? I would say that we go back to our study of Daniel and Cyrus, who sent the people back and actually paid for the restoration of the temple. Cyrus is, Cyrus is clearly an instrument of God in that case. So do I have a problem believing that a prophecy, Caiaphas delivers what turns out to be prophetic? I don't have a problem with it. I don't know how all that works.
I don't have a problem unless I start thinking that, is this the devil, which is still coming with the power of Jesus, allowing him to do it, or God do it? So
My pay grade continues to shrink. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, I don't know, and I don't have what I.
for the record, so does mine.
What I do know, though, is that what the understanding we're supposed to get from this is that this is literally prophetic, that Jesus will in fact die, not because these people wish him dead, but he is going to die for the people.
Which gets us back to the idea that he voluntarily
It does.
sacrificed.
It's all one teaching.
Okay, so these last verses in chapter 12, I was telling Scott today, many of us who have been churchgoers over the decades have heard the story of Lazarus being raised from the dead. And then we're going to go into another, in chapter 12, we're going to go into another thing that we hear often in churches. But I said, I've never heard these verses preached or talked about in church. So verse 54 of chapter 12. As a result, Jesus no longer went about publicly among the Jews, but he withdrew to a town called Ephraim in an area near the wilderness, and he stayed there with the disciples. Now the Jewish Passover was near, and many people went up from the country to Jerusalem to purify themselves before the Passover. They kept looking for Jesus and asking one another as they stood in the temple courts, "What do you think? Will he come to the feast at all?" But the chief priests and Pharisees had given orders that anyone who knew him, anyone that knew where he was, must report it so that they could arrest him.
So giving sight to the blind man was the Feast of Dedication. That's what we know as Hanukkah, and it is around our Christmas time. The Passover is Easter. It's those two are one and the same. Now it moves a little bit, but that's spring. So all of this has happened in between. He's gone out, and what we're told is he doesn't go publicly among the Jews doing these things anymore because his time hasn't come. They are literally going to pick him up at the first opportunity, and it's not his time yet. And it is very much specifically because his death, his sacrifice is associated and will be associated with the Passover lamb. His time comes at Passover for a reason. So he moves back out, he teaches the disciples, but he moves away because his time hasn't
So
come yet.
and it's probably 4 or 5 months that he is withdrawn.
So yeah, some number of months. And the next thing we know, and it's all of a sudden, the time of the Passover is here. And at Passover, the Jews who are within a couple of days at least are required to go to Jerusalem for Passover. Anybody else who can, it really is supposed to. But if you're close enough to get there within a few days, you are required to go to Jerusalem. Now, the people are asking, they're in the temple courts and they're looking for Jesus, and they're asking, do you think he's even going to show up? Do you think he's going to come? Why would they be asking that? Well, they're asking that because it's understood that the leaders are going to arrest him and kill him, and they know it. And it tells us they've actually issued an order that anybody who knows where he is required to tell them so they can go arrest him. And they're speculating, even though technically Jesus is supposed to be there, he's a rabbi. I mean, he is supposed to be in Jerusalem, but they're speculating, well, is this just humans? Do you think he's even going to show up? Do you think he's going to, or is he so afraid of these leaders that he's not even going to come to Jerusalem for the Passover? And that's stuck here at the end of a chapter because there are no chapter markings.
6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, the hometown of Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. And it's funny because we're going to hear this story, and we often hear the story. So this is 4 months later. In other words, 4 or 5 months later, he is gone. He's been out in Ephraim. He's coming back to Bethany, to Martha and Mary and Lazarus' house. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, the hometown of Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. So they hosted a dinner for Jesus there. Martha served, and Lazarus was among these, reclining at the table with him. When Mary took about a pint of expensive perfume made of pure nard, and she anointed Jesus's feet and wiped them with her hair, and the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was going to betray him, asked, "Why wasn't this perfume sold for 300 denarii and the money given to the poor?" Judas did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. As a keeper of the money bag, he used to take from what was put into it. Leave her alone, Jesus replied. She has kept this perfume in preparation for the day of my burial. The poor you will always have with you, but you will not always have me.
So he goes back to the house of Mary and Martha and Lazarus. You can imagine they're, after what they've been through, this is sort of a big deal. And they hosted dinner for him. You have to have that picture of Lazarus. Do you want to say this about the?
Well, we were listening to one of the sermons about Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. And one of the things, Lazarus is the witness, right? He was raised from the dead. And when you read these stories, the story of Lazarus, you realize you never hear one word. Lazarus does not speak one word. And it just never hit me. He never said, "I believe." He never said, Jesus raised me from my dead. They didn't record any word of Lazarus, which was interesting. Then you've got Mary and Martha. They talk about, look at these three friends that all had a different role. Lazarus was definitely a witness of being raised. Martha is the doer. She's the one that prepares things. She's the one that does that. There's another story in Luke about them going over to their house for dinner. They go over to these people's house. I mean, they are good friends of theirs, but Martha is the one who prepares the dinner, who sets up the table. She's the worker bee. She's the servant type person, servant to the Lord. And Mary, we'll see Mary in this thing. Mary is the worshiper. Mary is always at the feet of Jesus. Had another story in Luke, Martha's complaining, make Mary get up and help me. And Jesus says, she's right where she's supposed to be. She's at my feet listening to my word.
And it is an interesting picture of the three. And they're not just friends, they're brother and sisters.
Friends of Jesus.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But so they each sort of do, they sort of maintain this role. And we see this with people. We all have different gifts, different strengths. And Martha is the servant. Martha's serving there's this dinner, and Martha's going around serving everyone. Mary is right where she, is worshiping. But it says she takes this container. It's like a pint of expensive perfume. And she anoints his feet and dries them with her hair, which is shocking. I mean, it would be shocking to these people to have this woman touch his feet, much less with her hair. It's just not done. And they get on her. I mean, the people just throw a fit. I have no doubt they're shocked because it's a woman touching the rabbi's feet. That's presumptuous. But Judas says, we could have sold this for 300 denarii and done a lot for the poor. Well, 300 denarii is essentially a year's salary. It's a lot of money to anybody. A year's salary for the average worker. It's a bunch of money. And there, Judas is upset because John tells us Judas was a thief. He's the guy who keeps the money. Yeah, he would have had a lot to dip into. This is an expensive thing she does. And there's all this speculation, but sometimes in service to God, you know, if you're trying to walk, there are times that I think we are, you know, overcome where we do things that other people don't understand. I don't get how anybody could do that. And he gets on them. He says, leave her alone. She's doing, she had this put aside for my burial. And this stuff that she uses is specifically used. It's one of the things to keep bodies from stinking. It is a perfume, and they also use it for, you know, as a perfume. But he said she's had this year's salary worth of stuff put aside to anoint me for my burial. Does Mary really know exactly that because remember, this is Passover. It's 6 days before Passover. He's going to die in a week, give or take. Does Mary really know? She's had this set aside. Does she understand that death and burial is imminent, or is she just overcome with this desire to do that? Now, you know, I mean, Jesus brought her brother back to them, but she does it. And he says this thing, the poor will always be with us. And that's a quote from Deuteronomy. Huh? Anyway, I think it's Deuteronomy, but I've told you
Yeah,
over,
Deuteronomy 15:11.
over and over again that about almost half of what's in the New Testament is either quotes or references to the Old Testament. It's just there all the time. But there's a quote where the Jews are being told to help the poor. Your brothers and sisters, the people that are like us, believe in Yahweh. Don't be tight. If one of them needs something, provide it. And they say, actually, there'll always be poor with us. There are always going to be people with these needs. So he's quoting that, but he says the poor, as you know from Deuteronomy, the poor are always going to be with us, but I'm not going to be with you much longer. And what we see in this teaching is this beginning of the recognition that he is at the point of sacrifice. He's about to die.
The other thing that hit me on this is, so Martha is the one who, or sorry, Mary's the one who is the worshiper. She's considered the worshiper. And, you know, what is worship? And it's something I struggle with. You know, we think of worship, if you ask most people, if you're a churchgoer, what is worship? Worship often means songs, you know, hymns. But here, this is worship.
Absolutely.
And what is it, as you said? I don't know.
What we see from Mary is she's always at Jesus' feet. She's always there. And we even have a story. She puts other things aside to be there at his feet. Instead of being up helping her sister serve the meal, she says, I need to be here. And that's what Jesus' response is. She's right where she needs to be. I'm not taking that away from her. That's worship. This thing that she does with this gift, this outpouring of a year's salary on something that, and it does say, by the way, that after she does it, the whole house is filled with the scent of this perfume. It is a beautiful smell, and at the same time, it's the beginning of mourning. It's the beginning of the understanding of his death. This is one of those that I can't put it into words, but if you can try and picture the what happened there and the reasons why. But he does tell him, leave the woman alone.
And once again, you know, I always wondered, why is there 4 gospels, and are they that different? And I never could, you know, tell you the difference between John or Luke. They were just all stories. But the style of writing and what each of the gospel writers emphasized, you know, Scott's a big Luke fan. He's got an order. He's got a direction. John is more of this person. John, decades later, he is writing down this gospel, and it's the understanding. John is writing from, 20 years later, and he's remembering how all of this stuff makes sense now. everything in the puzzle that we didn't understand. We still don't understand a lot of things because it's above their pay grade, right? But a lot of the things made sense. All of a sudden, he remembers being in Bethany right before the Passover, and he remembers this weird thing with Mary putting, you know, a year's worth of salary of perfume and doing Jesus's feet, and it all makes sense.
There's a quote from Helen Keller that says the most important things in life can't be touched with the hands or seen with the eyes. They must be felt with the heart. That's John. John is giving us understanding. John is giving us these teachings that have to be felt with the heart.
I buy John, and I've already told you that I don't like his commentary. I don't see how that bad mouthing Iscariot helps believe. How does that help me believe, or anybody else believe, that he's a thief?
Well, I can tell you what John is up to with that. I believe I can, because of some other things that come out of it. But what you have to, the understanding of this is Judas betrays him, but Jesus knew the whole time. I mean, he is one of the inner circle. He's one of the 12 inner circle that are with him all the time. And he was allowed to have control of the purse strings. Jesus wasn't fooled. He wasn't taken in. He knew the whole time. And he allowed this betrayer to be in that, because it's the way it had to be. And John is simply showing us in this that Judas talks about this stuff could have been sold for a year's salary, and we could have helped a lot of poor people. Let me throw a commentary back, and again, since my infinite capacity to offend people, but a lot of churches have become social services organizations. And they talk about, we can help the poor, we can do this, we can do that. And they don't even mention God anymore. There was a church I was involved with, but they did this community outreach sort of thing. And I mentioned, you don't mention God once. I mean, isn't that sort of fundamental to who we are and who we're supposed to be? And I like it that we're doing things for people, but in the process, shouldn't we at least bring up something? Because otherwise, we might as well be a government social services agency. We're doing good deeds, but we're not supposed to do good deeds just, to make ourselves feel better. That's what Judas is, with this thing of, we could have sold this and helped the poor. And today, a lot of churches would be on his side on that. That's irresponsible. We should have taken the money and done whatever with it. And there you have Jesus' response. This is a big thing that's about to happen. And she is doing this because deep down, she knows who I am. She understands, and whether she knows it or not yet, she understands that I'm not going to be with you much longer. So, I think that telling that story about Judas is not only, is it meaningful that we understand he was there to be who he was, but I think we should be able to see today that just collecting money to distribute to the poor is not our mission. It comes with our mission, certainly it does, but it's not our mission.
I want to read the last.
But wasn't that the current state of the Jewish practice, and the high priest and all this sort of, they were corrupt already. They were using money for themselves, making money. Why do we want to say the guy's a thief? Yes, he was a thief.
Well,
Jesus is talking about a different thief.
If you want to take exception with John on this, I don't know what to tell you. He wrote it. You'll get a chance someday to talk to him about it. But this is a thing that he leaves for us, and I think it has merit.
Yeah. So we're on chapter 12, verse 9. Meanwhile, a large crowd of Jews learned that Jesus was there, and they came not only because of him, but also to see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. So the chief priests made plans to kill Lazarus as well, For on account of him, many of the Jews were deserting them and believing in Jesus. And like I
There-
said, I don't remember those 3 verses being read to me.
There's something I bet most of you never heard before.
Yeah,
Uh-uh.
Yeah,
And it's a sort of a big deal. It is a picture. And it just like talking about Judas, he's talking about the chief. What does it help? Well, you should have an understanding. This should tell us something about the world we live in. These people are so concerned about their own power, and this story of Lazarus being raised has gotten around. And so people are coming, I want to see, I want to see it with my own eyes. And so they're not only coming to see Jesus, they're coming to see this living example of what he's done and of who he is. And they're starting to believe Jesus, and the leaders are threatened by it. Does this sound like a skipping record? Do I keep saying the same thing? Yeah, I keep saying the same thing. And we're told that they think, if this is allowed to continue, we're in trouble. And so they literally make plans to kill Lazarus, right? This is like the mafia killing a witness before a trial. It's exactly like that. He's the one that's the living example of what's happened here. And they're going to have the man killed so that there is no living example of what's happened here. That's as corrupt as it gets. But I don't know. We've seen our own modern history, the same sort of thing going on.
and we're at 10, but once again, one of the things we love like going into the detail, then then looking at the big picture, then going back to the detail. Looking at the big picture, I always knew that Jesus's first miracle, and we don't know if it's his first miracle, but the one that started his public ministry was changing the water into the wine at the wedding of Cana. And most people know that. This was his last public miracle, was the raising of Lazarus. And it makes so much more sense next week when we talk about the triumphal entrance, or we know it as Palm Sunday, but it makes so much sense that it was just after 3 months after Lazarus being raised from, they're looking for Lazarus, they're looking for Jesus. So it's those bookends of his ministry that I think are interesting.
And stick around. That is one of the big things that tie into him riding into Jerusalem. But probably either late next week or 2 weeks from now, there's one more thing that's going to come out that is one of the most powerful, most beautiful things that I think is in the New Testament. And it's a thing that Mary and I are both passionate about. And it comes up in this book of John, and it's almost here. Stick around for that, because it has a lot to do with why we're doing what we're doing. Right?
Thanks, Tim.
God, we are thankful that the words are there, that the recount is there of these things that happened, and we almost mourn for our inability to fully understand the things that we miss, that might lead us to that life more abundant, to an understanding of why you would take time to pay attention to us, to actually care about us. And we see it so vividly displayed. And it makes me a little sad sometimes that we miss so much. There's just so much there, but we're thankful that the words are there, that we can go out and seek and look, and we can find those things. This week, if there's anything that I would ask for, is the help to be able to have the faith to listen to this and believe it, to understand that even though it's against everything that we can see with our eyes, everything that we can read in a science book, that we can have the faith to understand that there's more here than meets the eye, that there's more to this, and that we're right to trust you. We're right to read these things. Be with us this week. Be with those that we've remembered in our prayers, and other ones that we've forgotten. You know our hearts. Help us to take this same love and compassion to those that we meet. Amen.
You guys can unmute yourself. And Cindy and Paula, who haven't been on for a couple weeks, they're in Mexico on a first vacation in a very long time. And I've gotten a couple of texts. They're having an absolutely wonderful time.
We got a
So,
card from Cindy and Paula, and they're in Mexico.
you know,
And their cards often arrive at just the right time.
yeah, we got a card. Yeah, they do. They love to send them anyhow. So they are having a wonderful vacation and they're with Macaulay and Bill and Paula and Cindy. And so they sound like they're having a really good time.
And remember us, because we have now just over a week to move our.
And pray that we just work well together. How is that? How is that?
Oh, we might, and I'm not going to be shy about asking for it.
Anyhow, thank you, you guys. Carol, keep feeling better. Don't infect anybody.
Thank you. I'll try.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding you, Carol. You know that.
And Jack, I'm sitting here waving at you like you're in the center on everybody's screen. I do the dumbest things sometimes. It's good to see you. And Julie, and it's good to see you guys. It's so cool. You guys are up at the lake again, aren't you?
Yes.
Yeah. Ben and his girlfriend came out and Friday night we went and saw James Taylor in Austin. What a great concert. Man, it was really
Awesome.
good. And then we had last night, there's a big leukemia fundraiser called Kicking It in K-Town, which is started in Kosciuszko with a guy, Gary Moy. His wife passed away from leukemia, and it's catapulted to this new level of like, well, they had Travis Tritt there last night.
Josh Turner.
Oh
my gosh, we danced all night. It was fabulous.
That's
I was asking just yesterday, I asked Mary, when does Baylor football start?
9-3.
All right, we'll be watching.
Yeah, he asked that while we were building a shelf or something. He's like, when does Baylor football start? And I'm like,
I don't know if y'all saw it on Facebook or not, but Ben's on the watch list for the Mackey Award, which is the #1 tight end in the country. There's about 30 or 40 of them on the list all over the country, but he's on the list, so that's
Oh,
cool.
well, that's wonderful.
We're excited.
You guys take care.
Carol,
Thank you all.
if you need
Thank
anything,
you all.
you call.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.